Hi, everybody. I'm Will Driscoll. Here's Danilo Moura. We're with Volumetrica. It's a startup. We specialize in photogrammetry and volumetric video. We're brand new. Some of our colleagues are here in the audience. I have a background in performance capture, data survey. I'm a mediocre artist, which makes me a technical artist. Houdini is where I belong, and I've been here for five years as a Houdini artist. I'm excited to show you some breakthroughs we've had in photogrammetry as well as volumetric video. Houdini's played a huge role in just the simplification, making everything just work for us. And then, sorry, now I'm going to hand off to Danilo to give a little background on the physical, practical side of our operation.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. My name is Danilo Moura. I moved from Brazil 12 years ago to work as research and development engineer for Sony Pictures. Had an amazing job. I was like actually getting the intersection between movies and games. So I was getting assets from Columbia Pictures and put it on PlayStation. So it was like really awesome. But usually the theatrical assets are very, dense and made for cinema quality. You need to make it run on real time. And until today, a lot of the things that we're going to go here is like optimizing those assets, but it's like keeping the quality and making sure that we have a good result. I worked at Sony for about 8 years. And in the last 4 years, I have been working in a lot of different companies and a lot of different projects. And we're going to go over a few things that we did. And one interesting thing is like why we have, the pyramids here in the background is because Experius has made multiple trips to Egypt to scan a lot of the tombs and the artifacts that are in there. And Experius founder is actually from the family that created the Discovery Channel that creates the Curiosity Stream. And when I met them, they had just released the Queen Nefertari tomb, which is like the Sistine Chapel of ancient Egypt. They have those amazing paints that, try to tell the story of what they believed on the afterlife. So everybody, tried to understand what that was and what they're trying to communicate and what was that language. So a lot of the Egyptologists, they want to get as close as they can to those paintings. And we believe that when you have something like this, which is the actual recreation of the environment, you can get as close as you can. Imagine this room. If you were just seeing this picture of this wall, and separate from this one, they might have some kind of connection, right? So we feel like this is a really good opportunity to immortalize, that particular tomb and give access to everyone. So I think like it democratizes access to that point. And when we talk about photogrammetry and we talk about volumetric video, what exactly are we talking about? So photogrammetry has been out for like decades, but it has really got a huge boost in the past like 2 or 3 years. If you guys are new to photogrammetry, here at the bottom left of the presentation, I recommend you guys to look for previous talks from DICE, from Unity, from Unreal, that they really go like about an hour and a half just to how to take the pictures and going through the pipeline. Our talk is more about techniques and how to take that to the next level because, I'm not sure if you know, the pharaohs really like gold. And they really liked, it wasn't gold, it was like wood painted in gold. So that makes it really hard. That's one of the most challenging things for you to actually scan in photogrammetry. And we chose like the worst results that we got and how Houdini helped us the best, to fix some of those things. The reality is, even with all the things that we're gonna go over and how you should prepare to get it done, when you're dealing with metallic, it's just like really, really hard. So you can see here on the left, a guitar, as you guys probably know, is very reflective. So it's a challenging object to capture. So what we did was actually put that inside of a studio, put it like April tags, fiducial markers, everything that can help the camera to understand where the position and where you're moving the camera around. And each one of those white dots moving around is actually a photo. So yes, we took about like 900 pictures to actually be able to get that guitar. And you can use that to create quick photorealistic objects. If you guys probably know the way 3D works, that's the hardest thing for you to achieve, something that actually looks real, right? So photogrammetry lets you get fast forward track to get to there. And you can use that for small objects, but you can also use that to environments. So you can see here, you get your color card, you measure all the pictures, you take the pictures, almost like every meter, and you take pictures of everything, because if the camera is not seeing, it's just not going to be on your cell. So take as many pictures as you can, go prepare to scan, as many pictures as you can take. I went to Italy to scan this scenarios for the movie Seven Miracles from HTC Vive Studios. And you can see here that we're able to achieve like a 3D, environment. And this is actually directly from the scan, just 3-4 hours after it being scanned. So it quickly takes you there, and then later we're gonna go and optimize. When you're talking about volumetric video, it's kind of like the same principle. You have to capture from all the different angles. So while you're seeing the actor here surrounded by cameras, right? You're actually gonna capture a performance of an actor going with cameras all around him. So you get that result of, okay, I know where all those point cloud points are, and you can combine that. And when you know the distance between 2 points, you can draw a line, and you have 3-4 points, you can project the texture on it. So that's how you kind of get the 3D models. But imagine having 60 3D models with textures and UVs to play through the machine. So there's a lot of optimization to actually get that quality out. But we feel like this is the perfect match for spatial technologies, right? It can be like VR, AR, all of those different technologies. It's in the immersive side, it really makes a lot of sense. So how do we take that to the next level? It's really adding skeleton data, artificial intelligence, and we're really into this path of R&D to create simulated, interactive holograms. So you can feel like you are there with someone. The first project that was close to what we tried to achieve was with Buzz Aldrin. Actually, today has been 2 years. Today is 2 years and 2 days that we released this project at South by Southwest. And you can see here, Buzz takes you in a journey to the moon and Mars, and his whole idea on how to colonize Mars. And we try to make Buzz to look you in the eye. We actually faked this by creating him as a hologram, as a projection, and we were hiding his feet. So depending on the height of the other user, we were making Buzz taller or lower because we couldn't really rotate his head. But it has been more than 2.5 years that we have been looking into solutions and how to create bones and how to attach bones to the neck and the head area and be able to move around. There's a lot of good use cases in here. After we worked on this, we felt, hey, a storytelling experience is really nice, but sometimes you want to really learn. You want to go through a museum experience. You want to be able to walk around. So we used photogrammetry, and I think it was 11,000 images that NASA gave to us. And we recreated the moon with all the different photographs. So you can actually walk around the environment, feel like you can totally see what happened. And the other thing that I did that for my hometown in Belém in the north of Brazil. 2 million people go follow the image of Mary as pilgrims between two churches. That takes 7 hours, and 2 million people try to get as close as they can to the vest of Mary. And even if you can try to get there, you're going to be behind glasses or behind velvet ropes, right? So it's really hard for you to get as close as you can. And we feel like this is a really nice way to perpetualize something. For example, in the National Museum in Rio de Janeiro, just about a few months ago, it just completely got burned out. So if you can, digitize everything as fast as you can. And here you're seeing one of the hardest thing, which is, holograms interacting with objects, like dropping water back into, be able to interact with those objects is one of the hardest things. And I'm going to go a little bit more over some of the scenes that we did for Seven Miracles, but this is our path and how we can, do photogrammetry and volumetric video and combine the two and really take that whole technology to the next level. And while looking for use cases, what has been done in a nice way, we actually found another Nefertari tomb that was actually put into, from our friends on High Fidelity, into a museum experience that you have Egyptologists is actually scheduled to Eventbrite to meet up. And the Egyptologists takes anyone through that museum. And it's not like the scripted, pre-recorded, right? You can ask anything, so it's much more interactive. So now it's the time to go and talk about our flagship project, the one that I went personally to Egypt to scan all of the items, and we started using all of those technologies. This was the first one that we fully used all of the side effects pipeline. We were before that using a lot of different software, a lot of different tools, and when I met We was actually towards the end of the Jesus movie. We actually had something that we needed to get done, and we was like, hey, Houdini can do that like pretty fast. It's like, oh, okay. And after that, we started really going through the whole pipeline. So when you're trying to scan an object like this statue, which is mostly wood painted in gold, super reflective, we actually work closely with the Cairo Museum and the Giza Museum, because I said, if we're going to go all the way to scan this, we really need some things. We need, a no glass access. We need a rolling ladder, and we need to be able to get as close as we can to the object. And believe me, Elliot was there with me, and he saw sometimes, the museum director was always with us, making sure that we were being prudent, on how we were approaching the objects, because they're 4,000-year-old objects, and a lot of people travel to Egypt exactly to see, those items. And by the way, some of those items will never leave Egypt. So if you don't go into the plane, the best way to see it is actually through a VR experience or, something like that. The other thing that we did was we actually set up in the museums areas where we put a photo studio, and we were putting objects in there. That was for speed. If the object was small enough, we put it in there, and it was automatically rotating every 10 degrees. And you see here the photographer really low on the floor, and then we were just changing the tripod height and just taking a lot of pictures just for speed. We needed to capture more than 70 items, so we really needed to do that as fast as possible. And we also had an amazing access to the location where those assets were, and we were lucky to have this very diffuse light here on the right side, and we were prudent in having our computers by our sides and make sure that we were reviewing the assets before we left the location. So after all the images were scanned, we got back to LA, and we started handing over to Will to go over some of the Houdini pipeline.
Okay, Houdini time. You're here for Houdini. So in this particular King Tut pipeline, some of these concepts were so basic, we're actually able to train our other artists on the project this pipeline so we could crank out these artifacts faster. So these were all the core tools that we used when bringing objects in, importing into Houdini. We find that an OBJ with vertex colors or a PLY with vertex colors is the optimum choice. You want to avoid the vertex normals. A lot of times that hangs or creates the file a lot larger. We find that for more complicated objects, it was 25 million to 45 million polygons. That was our starting point, including the things we had to clean up. So within Houdini, there's basically two tools you can use to create photogrammetry. Louise did a talk a little while ago introducing the reality capture plugin that you can work natively within Houdini. And Paul recently created a tool for Alice Vision, which is open source. The pros and cons, reality capture is probably the most powerful photogrammetry tool on the market, arguably, but it costs money. There's licensing tools for command line. It's really expensive. Alice Vision is freeware, but it takes maybe 5 times longer to solve. And to get your textures, it goes through Texture Atlas as opposed to vertex colors. And our pipeline is mainly vertex colors, so we haven't really dabbled in Alice Vision too much. But basically what we do is once our object's in, we orient it. A lot of times within reality capture, all we have to do is a 90-degree rotate because we've set the ground plane. So we just do a basic manual transform. But Houdini has a straighten tool and an axis align. Those work together. Straighten does up vector, so you can paint essentially what you consider the up. It snaps into place. Axis align drops it at the 000 origin. Then to the right of that, the black section, I try to avoid blasts because it's destructive. But you can select points at the end and delete them. Customized deletes. You can clip below, removing anything below the plane you select. Delete by bounding box or by a sphere to just either isolate points you want to keep or delete outside of it. And then I tend to use a delete small parts, which is part of the game development tool set. That just cleans up all the tiny little polygon noise created by all of our deletes. And a lot of times I use sculpt with the smoothing on just to touch up very pointy edges, very clear artifacts. A lot of times you can just clean it up manually that way, or you can apply global smooth, or you can use groups and, isolate certain regions by curvature, etc. Soften normals, a lot of times I use towards the end of the pipeline just to soften everything, just give it the cleanest result. And use polyfill to watertight the objects. Sometimes I use a remesh, but not so much, because voxel mesh is actually the key tool. It uses VDB technology, goes to VDBs, goes back to polygons, just keeps everything clean for that game resolution result. And sometimes we found in our pipeline we had round tripping out to ZBrush, Mudbox artists on our team who aren't Houdini artists. So we found instant meshes a lot of times, gave them the right topology they needed to work with. Polyreduce is one of the golden tools for us. We use it to optimize for work, and then we disable it later, as well as we take the high resolution mesh and convert it, downgrade it for game, and it preserves UVs very nicely. And then there's an all-in-one package game res tool, which kind of does a lot of these things for you. And then UV tools, the auto UV tools are very handy. You can visualize them, see if there's any issues going on. In some of our cases, we wanted to show the front faces of an object, give it as much real estate as we can within our UVs. So a lot of times we'd custom UV. And then there's a node D-Light, which uses the 3D model to actually figure out where's the specularities, where are the shadows coming from. I find that this is a crapshoot tool. Sometimes it gives us good results. Sometimes the results are bonkers. So as a result, we use our export, the Simple Baker. A lot of times I use a Simple Baker, 2 of them, one for the D-Light version, one for the albedo straight version, and let the texture artist deal with it. So digging in, here's the reality capture plugin within Houdini. You may have seen Louise's thing, so sorry if this is a repeat, but you bring in your images through register images. Next, you align your images. I find the defector sensitivity as high, or detector sensitivity, sorry, I can't read here, is as high is better than the default medium, and you have to get license at this point. That's a tricky part. Sometimes you have to paste a token into your browser the first time, but then beyond. Sorry, whoops.
I'm gonna go back.
Yeah, I gotta go back. Sorry.
No worries.
Sorry, okay. Oh, technical difficulties, sorry, folks.
Where do you want to go in the video?
Just, yeah, right there somewhere. Are we still playing?
Yes,
Okay, great. Sorry about that. So we brought in our images, then we aligned images. So now's a good time. So I support a bunch of Patreons. One of my favorites is Animatrix. He has a lot of good tools for point clouds and mesh cleanup. He's got a tool that I use once we get to that point. So you see all this noise around your object. Those are just extra points. You can obviously set a delete and clean it out. But I use one of Animatrix's tools that just deletes isolated points. I set the neighbor to 1, which means every point has to have a nearby neighbor, otherwise delete it within the radius. And that allows us to set the bounding box so that when we solve our object, it's only focused on the area of interest for us. And I find 15 million polygons is a pretty good number for a lot of like medium, lower end objects. And then lastly, you can output the texture as well as an OBJ, for further cleanup and work you want to, and preserving that higher texture. A lot of times in your final bake, you can bake the highest quality, whereas some of the vertex colors can blur as you degrade or you lose some details. In our case, we have a bunch of hieroglyphs on very intricate detail, so we found we had to use that process. And then here's the here's the texture albedo pass for that it spat out. And then nextly, that same object, originally when we solved it way back when, the tools actually weren't as sophisticated, I'm guessing. We had some artifacting on one of the sides of this box. And as you see, it's kind of a symmetrical object. So Louise actually turned me on to his symmetrical little pipeline. And so we adapted it where For starters, we clean up everything we don't need using the clip once again, just to cut everything from below. And then we're going to use the delete small parts, as I mentioned just a minute ago. That just cleans up all that dirt underneath. And then, as you see, the transforms aren't too bad. So I do a manual transform, and this allows me to orient exactly where I want my cut down the middle to occur. And at this point, we're at the 15 million polygons. Or is it 25? I don't know. Anyway, so I downgrade it using the polyreduce, and this is my working resolution now. Everything from here on, I can do a lot faster. Don't have to wait for all the calculations. So basically, we isolate the side of the box that was good, and we mirror it. At this point, it's two objects. So we're going to have to isolate the border. Sorry, I'm cutting my house up, getting ahead of myself. So we isolate the border, and this is how we're going to fuse at the border to create one solid object. And next, we want to clean up the edges of the border, just smooth those out, just in case if there's any artifacting that occurs. We promote to edges, and then we promote the edges to points. We promote the edges to polygons, then the polygons to points. And then with the blur border, we're able to blur with points. So at this point, in our normals, what we do is we set the face area and then cusp at 180, and this just cleans everything up. Your normals will be pretty clean. And then axis align just snaps it into its place. And before we cache this out, ready to use this as our high res to bake down, we want to turn off our polyreduce so that we go back to our high resolution version. And so next step, here's a statue. There's twin statues that we had to deal with. And our first step, some of these artifacts come in with a shot material path. So we want to get rid of that just so when we bake it in the end, there's no extra attributes that it confuses it, because sometimes the albedo pass comes out black, and it's different things cause that. So here we use delete to isolate the area we want to keep, and a clip below just to keep a clean cut underneath. And then, as you can see, there's a few artifacts of small pieces we have to delete using the delete small part SOP. And then for this object, at this point, we did a global smooth. So I just did a smooth node, and then we polyfill the bottom. And at this point, as you can see with the object, we're missing some of the data because thin objects have a difficult time solving. So what we did is we borrow from above, and we delete a piece off, isolate that, transform that down to fill in the part that's missing. And then the next thing we have to do is now, since there's two individual pieces, we use a for each loop with connectivity to polyfill those. And we do that so that we can use the voxel mesh tool. We use the voxel mesh tool to give us the clean topology we need to bake down to our game res. But before we do that, some of these objects with all the dirt and grime on it, they're pretty rigid, pretty noisy objects, if you will. So I use the sculpt tool with smooth, and I just fixed some of the obvious things. And I meant to fast forward this piece, so maybe I can do it manually.
If we go, it's going to go to the next video, by the way.
Anyway, hope everybody's enjoying GDC.
And I think this is a nice way to show, so when you're dealing with the reflective surface, the light just bounces around everywhere. So that's why when you're seeing the mesh by itself, you just like it's irregular. But then you can actually go there and paint and just move it out. And believe me, it's much faster than if you're trying to model the thing from scratch, right? So that's why, if the photogrammetry can take you to 60%, 70%, 80%, it's already a huge win. And at the end, when you're going to have all your surfaces cleaned up, you can just bake all the textures back and get that photorealistic result that you want to have. Here's one of the images with the final result. We into Substance. If you guys don't know Substance, like go check it out. It's an amazing tool to help paint all of the metallic and really give you. One great thing about photogrammetry, by the way, you have like 900 pictures to tell exactly how the reflection is supposed to look. So you can always be looking around and thinking, oh no, put a little bit more and a little bit less. Because, you know, artists, when they have to interpret an object, right, they have to fill in the gaps. But we have 900 pictures to help fill in the gaps. So that helps a lot. Here's a little bit of the pipeline specific for metallic. We ended up, because of the short amount of time, we went with 2 photographers, 2 different cameras. The Sony camera was actually better for low light objects, and sometimes you just couldn't really control the light of the environment, and we needed to move fast in between the museums. In the ones that we had enough time and that we prioritized, we put objects inside a photo studio, and we had, if you have metallic, you like use polarizing filters in a ring flash, and I'm going to go over in the next slide. If it's metallic, don't put it on the turntable because you actually want to use the reflection of the room with the actual light. If you're rotating, then the software really is going to get very lost on how the reflection is supposed to look. And one nice contribution that we have for the pipeline is actually, I felt like was much faster to use After Effects and open that with the camera raw to just like automate, especially when I was dealing like 900 or sometimes, you know, like 1500 images that I had to go through. I opened the first one, equalize, like you bring, right here you have the highlights, you bring it down, you get the shadows, you bring it up. So kind of like try to make it like more like uniform. But sometimes that's not really achievable. So if you see the images on the top, I actually chose the worst scenario when I was just setting up the camera at the beginning. And then I used the software called Rematch Pro, where it actually, you tell them the first image that is the valid one that you want to use. And then that software goes and has like many modes to get it done. So it goes like to histogram, levels, like you name it. And that's going to try to match the pictures. And remember, it's using similar pictures to create a 3D object. So the best you can try to match the colors, you know, it's going to help the software to create the 3D model at the end for you. It's an amazing tool. And here's like one of the results. So this is actually, after the color correction, we haven't touched it in anything. This is actually King Tut's, the outer sarcophagus version, coming out with, you know, something like 498 images. So this one wasn't even like too many images. And you were able to get like all of those details. You don't have the reflections here yet, but at least you got a very solid representation of how that object actually looks. Sometimes we're actually looking online to try to purchase some of those items if we needed to use, and we're just like, oh my God, actually have nothing to do with what the real object is. So I think there's a lot of value of going there and scanning. So in some cases, you know, we choose here to go into the Houdini pipeline, the worst case scenario. So let's go through the inner sarcophagus.
Yep. So here's the inner sarcophagus in Houdini. As you can see, there's quite a bit to clean up. So basically, here's the 3 pieces. You got the inner sarcophagus, the lid, and then the base of the outer sarcophagus. So for this particular object, it's essentially our most important object. So it was all artists on deck, which included our mudbox artists. So in this particular case, there was a lot of round tripping. So we sent the object to our artist to smooth, and when it comes back, there's no vertex colors anymore. Luckily, we maintained a similar topology, so we're able to take the point color back and transfer it back on, and delete. And then we deleted all the extra attributes that we didn't need after. It was done in FBX, so we got a bunch of FBX attributes that don't really matter to us. Let's see what else.
But that's pretty good for interoperability between, you know, the softwares.
Yeah. So and then that became our high res, and then as I mentioned earlier, with our UVs, our texture artists, made the front of the sarcophagus, gave that most of the real estate, and obviously the back faces a
little bit less.
Yeah, far less. I'll show you the visualize UVs. This is another handy tool that I find. A lot of times you can see where the errors are occurring if your texture looks a little funny to you. And as you can see, our UV artist, gave all the space for the front side.
The other thing, you want to make sure that the texel density, which is those, like checkerboard that you just saw, like they are pretty much equal.
Yeah.
So that helps a lot.
And then here's what the auto UVs kicked out to us. And obviously the back faces aren't as important, and it wasn't giving us the area we need the most. So while auto UV solves 9 out of 10 problems, this is one of the times just doing it manually was the way to go.
So you can focus the quality on the areas that you need the most. At the end, we need to make it run in VR at 90 frames per second. 2 cameras, 1 per eye. So it's like, you really need to optimize as much as you can.
Yep. Okay, next video. And so for the outer lid, there's 2 pieces, as you saw earlier with this. It was just easier to cut them in half. First, we cleaned up everything. And then as a result, we did the same UV smoothing, bring back the color. But as I said, we cut the bottom off, we cut the top off, and isolating them separately, allowed for more texture real estate, allowed for just easier cleanup in general. And obviously we spent a lot more time on the front of it versus the base. And as you can see, I mentioned earlier, in the green and the blue nodes in the bottom are the simple bakers. The blue is D-light, so we just use the D-light albedo. And then we try to blend that in with the simple baker using outputting the normals, the albedo, and the ambient occlusion passes. And here's the result in Marmoset toolkit, tool bag. I'm not a Marmoset user, and I actually team viewed in with this, so please bear with me. I did this last minute, just to be able to fit these in, but this should show you kind of the level of detail we needed to capture to really deliver something that our audience is really going to be impressed with, because, when you think of King Tut, this is the first image that comes to my mind, at least. And then you can talk about this.
Well, so this is a quick video just to show like the experience that we're building. You want to recreate that moment of Howard Carter going and finding the tomb and getting inside of it, like breaking through the walls and finding it. And that's where those items that we scan, they all make sense, right? Right now, separate pieces in different museums all over the world. And here you can actually see a recreation of how that tomb was actually found. And you can see where the statues that we scanned that were actually located inside the tomb. And,
it's work in progress. So
it's a work in progress. That's why I have some frame rate information on the screen and a lot of other things that we are working on. But you get an idea of, we want to give a flashlight to the user so he feel like he's an explorer and he can, really inspect the items if they want. Carter, he lifted the sarcophagus, and we are, playing with some of the tools on how to make that interactive. And I feel like, it's really getting to the point of, you discover. I don't want to spoil too much of the story and what we're trying to do behind, but, it's really having a lot of control and make sure that all of those things are going to be running with the animations. And if you want to talk a little bit about the ropes too, there was...
Yeah, so I've been working with Luis a little bit on this, trying to use as much of the game tools as possible. My background's mostly in the visual effects side, so if it weren't for his game tools or the team's game tools, I'd be tough out of luck when it came to games. But as a result, we use some of the bone skinning and the vertex animation shaders for the ropes. This isn't actually our final ropes, etc. But
it's a working process.
But we're able to solve a lot of problems that we otherwise couldn't solve before. And so here's a classic Gibson SG guitar. This is actually the hardest object we've had to solve. We used fiduciary markers, some man-made ones, as you can see, pretty cheesy, but it helped us solve the tough areas of the guitar that just weren't solved because of reflections and scratches, etc., from different angles. So as you can see, I had to do quite a bit of clipping and deleting because there's a whole bunch of capture that we didn't need. We just need the guitar.
It's going through the thinking and cleaning and stuff.
Yeah, I meant to fast forward some of these. Apologies, everybody.
I think we can go to the next video.
Okay. So basically, so I isolated all this with a bunch of delete nodes, and as you can see, the bottom, we actually had to replace the bottom of the guitar. And what I did is I took pieces of the left and the right side of the guitar to fill in that missing piece. And then I used similar to our symmetry thing earlier with the box to bring back the knobs, etc., because those were kind of artifacted a little bit. Here's a guitar. The roughness is off on this, so please bear with us. I don't think that pass completed correctly. But anyway, here's the guitar that we actually use this. We match moved this into a volumetric scene we'll cover shortly. And then now to photogrammetry. Oh, is there sound? Wow.
There's some.
Anyway, this is from, we have a capture stage in Los Angeles. We use a company called 4D Views. We teamed up with them. And this is a Captain Morgan ad that we did. Just a spec ad, just for us to test our tools out.
And really, that goes to show the flexibility, all the things that all the use cases you can do with volumetric video as well.
Yeah, and so we have an AR app we're working on. So anyway, my background came, I worked with Intel Studios on this CES presentation from about a year ago. They're I guess, famous for this giant dome that they created, and then we shot this scene, and I was the technical director on this, so I had to deal with all these point cloud data, cleanup, segmentation, working in reality capture facades, all that fun stuff. Match moving the stick, guns, etc., because none of those solve properly. And Danilo.
That's for me. Yep. So prior to joining, Experius and Volumetric, I actually spent 3.5 weeks in Italy shooting the Jesus movie and being responsible for like the volumetric scenes, and also after that the whole post-production, both on the 360 video side and for the 7 volumetric scenes. It was like an amazing location. It's in the south of Italy, a city called Matera, and I was like, I want to scan everything. Can I put an 8K camera on top of a drone and fly it around? And they said yes, so I went for it. And we just basically, I came out there with like 49 scenes, environments that were just fully scanned. Like I just couldn't stop taking pictures. We went with a lot of cards, so we just like scanned as much as I could. I was fascinated. And this is one of the scenes that, we did that I tried to achieve that photorealistic look. And here's how we used the drone footage, which was a 360 camera. So we actually took stills from that video in the center and used AGSoft, which is another photogrammetry software, to combine all of those images and be able to create like the 3D environment that sits here on the far back scene of the scenario. So it was like pretty interesting to be able to get some of that. And this is actually the scene that we first collaborated. The interesting part of the story is that we had a milestone to show like at the Raindance Film Festival, and we wanted to smooth it out some of the polygons of the volumetric video. And like me and another Maya artist, we were just talking, my friend Christian, and we're just like, oh, we can't clean this thing up by tomorrow. And then we was like, guys, I think Houdini can't get done that over the night. So pretty much Houdini here like put up a miracle just before we went to show the movie for the first time in London for the Raindance Film Festival. And here's the deconstruction of that scene where you can see the photogrammetry, the actors, and the scene in Houdini. This is a scene that we actually shot with 40 views in Grenoble. It's kind of like 1 hour driving from Lyon. It was actually pretty cool. And the environment was shot in Italy. The actors were shot in France, but actually months after. And we just combined all the two, did the relighting. So there's a lot of flexibility here. And if you talk about how do you want to do the post-production and what do you want to come out, this is actually optimized heavily to run in VR. But if you want to use that for actual TV production or virtual production, you can actually start using that and just do the cut of the movie where do you want it to go. And you also have as a bonus, the AR and the VR version that you can just like walk around. One of the challenging things that you actually have is to actually manually positioning the audio. because they're acting. They're just like moving around, projecting the audio all over the place, and you actually need to manually go in position. That was another motivation for us to say, like, man, we really need to figure it out, how to put the bones and how to be able to automate some of those things. And here's a little bit of the scene in Houdini and how you.
Yeah, so the key difficulty with volumetric video is inanimate objects have a lot of noise. If they're just sitting there, the object changes, unlike photogrammetry, obviously. So in this case, we had to clean up that blanket over the Lazarus actor, and as Danilo said, I was able to pull that off overnight because of the procedural tools, the deletes, time shift, etc. Obviously auto UVs, etc. So digging in, we've developed a bunch of tools. The Buzz Aldrin example, Danilo was saying, he's been always talking, how do we get people to look you in the eye the whole time? So one of my friends, Varomix, who presents a lot of times, he was just like, hey, you could do something really easy. I was just talking to him about, hey, I need to build a bunch of tools. So he took it on himself to build this one, just a quick look at tool, and it's agnostically can help us port into Unreal and Unity. So, here's just an example of that's what it looks like when they wouldn't be making eye contact with you. There she is looking at you. And there's a side by side.
We have the side by side and how it works.
So, digging a step deeper, this is for a little Old Spice spec ad we did. They always try to be funny. They've got a product called Guitar Solo. So we thought it'd be funny, guy playing air guitar in the shower, and then we're like, well, one of my friends has a fancy guitar. He's like, why don't you just use my fancy guitar? And he's actually playing a guitar in the shower. So in volumetric, we couldn't use the guitar we showed you earlier with photogrammetry. That just would never solve. So we scuffed up a cheap guitar very similar to it, and we chose to actually replace it using volumetric tools, no 3D tracking, etc. So before I get into it, one of the challenges with volumetric content is your UVs change, your points numbers change every single frame a lot of times. In some cases, if an object just has subtle movement, it'll maintain. But this is one of the biggest challenges with volumetric video, period. And as you can see, bear with me, I team viewed in for this, so it's gonna creep in. But in a moment, you'll see that the point numbers change every single frame for us. So how do you solve anything? So we developed tools with actually we take our mesh. We convert it to...
we have time.
Okay. Getting a little ahead of myself. Sorry, folks. But anyway, as you see, the point numbers change every frame.
So the hardest thing is because when you're skinning the vertices to a bone. But if they are changing it all the time, it just it's much more challenging. So because of that, there were different clever solutions to go around this problem.
So basically... within this, I decided to build a tool that keys that guitar out. First, I had to convert the colors to take the UVs and convert it to vertex color after I deleted the parts of the guitar that are most obstructive, when I match move over. So basically, one of the quick tools we developed, one of the really basic tools. So I just manually cut out the sections that I knew don't change much in this clip. And then in this tool, once it opens, first I just scatter points, just basic. I use one that's 1 million relaxed, 1 million unrelaxed, just kind of fills in all the spaces. And I just use a simple VOPs just to create the vertex color using the actual UVs back onto the object itself. And then as a result, I created a color key tool that isolates everything that you don't need. In this case, I just needed the reds. So I use this, I convert this to particle fluid, and as a result, I use that to isolate a group. I use that to define the group on the actual mesh itself. And I'll explain in a sec why I did that.
So basically, what I'm trying to do is to do, a motion track using point cloud to be able to track the original guitar, and use the one that we photogrammetry and to have that 3D model with the perfect reflection and all the shaders and stuff. So it was pretty hard.
And this was an experimental idea that kind of worked. You'll see in a few minutes. but these are the kind of ideas that we're trying to create, generate ways to use the data that's already there, so we don't have to go to third-party 3D tracking softwares.
That was one of the things that was excited us the most at Volumetrica, which is like, hey, we have a lot of those tools that no one actually did. And because of our visual effects background, we're just like, hey, I have, a lot of my experience, has a lot of Houdini experience. And now I'm like, hey, I'm really trying to get as much as we can. And, we just collaborate with just the best tool to attack some of the problems.
So here, we use another animatrix tool called the Point Cloud something. I don't know what it's called. I'm sorry. It's off of his Patreon. But basically, it takes a point cloud, and it figures out where the origin is based off of how it travels. And then I used one of my friends, Adam Swab, has a path to form. I just took two of the points that were really consistent for most of the clip and created a curve in the middle of them, and then just slapped that object mainly for the orientation of it, because then I can use the roll for when the guitar moves up and down. And here's me importing the Houdini asset. And so as you see, it just snapped right in. Then I think actually I can.
I think the idea is.
Yeah. So there we go. And then the next step is the environment he's in. We had him in a shower environment, so we used the new Vellum cloth tools for a shower curtain, and we used a few tricks I'll show you in a sec on how he interacted with it. This is the shower base. There's a Vellum cloth already cached out, and we use vertex animation shaders to bake the cloth out. And for game engine, but
for optimization, so it can run fast in real time.
So we'll play this clip for you in a moment, but he opens the shower curtain, and in order to have that interactivity, at first, another little Veramix thing that he was playing with, but he created a collider that he just manually animated. But recently, we added biped skeletons to our toolkit. So I went back in and added that for the velocity purposes. Because all the volumetric content has no velocity whatsoever. It's like image, 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 or model, model, model for that matter. So here's our little Old Spice spec.
Done completely in Volumetric.
Yeah, and so this has the track guitar, so you'll notice some issues with it, but this is before we really cleaned it up.
It's an R&D process, and I feel like we were able to dominate it. Now it's really like just polishing, but we were able to prove that we're able to do that as a tool.
So with our stage, we're able to do these little side spec ads while we're unfortunately, we couldn't show a lot of our sensitive content. It's not ready to show. So we build our tools with a lot of these spec things that we can share, collaborate with other artists, etc., and then develop the tools for our actual production purpose. Because the end game goal is to develop a full toolkit of volumetric tools within Houdini.
And really, unleash the creative power, for Volumetric, using all the tools that we already have for 2D.
So digging in, we work with a company in Germany that helped us with biped markerless recognition using our volumetric assets.
And yes, that's me as an actor, playing,
and so,
a saber fight.
Yeah, so what a better nerdy test than a lightsaber battle. So here's your 2 seconds of lightsaber battle. And Danilo is obviously Darth Vader.
Yeah, I'm playing the bad guy here. And the whole idea, you have, the sabers being tracked and moving around, and this really proves that now if you need to do that scene, they need to move, and you can just attach the audio to a bone. Like you can do now anything. It's going to really streamline the process, make things to be very fast. And that's the end of our
what we have to
presentation.
show.
Thank you so much, guys. I think we might have 2 minutes for Q&A. If you guys have any questions or want to have any curiosity. Do we have a microphone or?
Does that box thing work?
Yeah, there's a box somewhere. Or box. Oh. Yeah, box. Alright. When comparing between reality capture and something like Edge-Assault Photo Scan, when interacting with Houdini's, you guys didn't say you guys had used Alice Vision yet for processing.
A test. Yeah, we did a few
We did
tests.
tests. This all happened after our production because I only heard about it from Paul's video 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Which
So-
one would you say? You said reality capture feeds better into Houdini overall,
Uh,
or was Alice Vision comparable?
They are all good tools. It really depends what you're trying to solve. Inside of Houdini, you have a piece of reality capture. For example, in that Jesus scene that we have, the marketplace, we actually had the drone, which came from Edgesoft, and we did, the spherical images to create the distant geometry. We needed to do control points to be able to, combine everything to just like one geometry. They're actually a laser scanning plus, the photogrammetry. So Edgesoft for a 360 video, and you have a reality capture for like the photogrammetry, and Alice Vision also gave us good results, but just a little bit slower.
Yeah, it took almost 5 times longer to get. So basically, within Houdini, we solved our small to medium complexity objects. The sarcophagus, et cetera, would just
The hard
hang.
ones. We went back to reality.
So we're saying like maybe 80 images to 200 images it can handle within Houdini. You go into 300-400. I don't want to sit around waiting for that.
Yeah.
But reality capture, for performance, results, ease of use, that's just the one I would choose. But if you're gonna hit an object that's extremely complicated, Edgesoft tends to be the answer, especially if you have camera data, etc.
And it's a kind of nice thing because
Just takes forever as well.
he used more Edgesoft and I used more reality capture, so it was like a good combination of different like tool sets and what we expect and try to get out of it. So it has been really nice to collaborate. Anyone else? This gentleman here in the front.
So just a quick question about how you brought the biped animation, quantified animation into the game engine. Was that done also with a vertex texture, or since you had the like joint fitting tool, did you end up just baking it to joint animation?
Yeah, and we just exported like as an FBX animation. And then
Well, it's not native. It's actually a third-party company created the tools. We're actually working with them to create like an API within Houdini at a certain point.
yeah,
But it's actually a motion capture technology company.
yeah,
It's a company called The Captury, out of The Captury.
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Well, guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys being here. Thank you.